welcome to a slightly technical YouTube video in which we are going to be talking about probably the most important guitar pedal that everybody should have, in my opinion, and it is an EQ pedal. Now, specifically in this video, we are going to be talking about the Boss GE7, the Boss GE-B7, the differences, the mods, do you need to mod them, all the myths around this pedal we're gonna explore in this video. So for everybody who is first time on the channel, you should know that I'm Marco and I do not consider myself a normal person. Therefore, I take Black Sabbath as my medicine every day. So after a huge dose of Black Sabbath this morning, I compiled myself a cup of coffee in a shroom cup, which is something that I absolutely adore. So I also suggest to all the people who are watching this video, just go get a beverage and spend the next few minutes with me exploring, talking about, like really being super nerdy about these EQ pedals, and trust me, you're gonna be happier after the video. Alright, so there are a lot of myths around this pedal. I would say that pretty much the entire internet knows now, after Tom Bukovac said it in the rig rundown, that this pedal should be modded, even though he said like you can mod it, but you don't have to mod it. Like, he pretty much doesn't care because it's not a huge difference, I'm gonna say right off the bat, but we're gonna explore everything. So the way how I figured out we're gonna do this video, first, we are going to test the noise on these pedals. I have a G7, a GE-B7. The G7 is an older one, Japanese one, and the GE-B7 is one built after like the year 2000, something like this. Just like a newer one, but still moddable. It's not like the newest ones are built with SMD technology. And basically, we're going to compare these two. We are going to compare how the equalizer works on both of these pedals, so we're also going to explore the differences between the bass version and the normal guitar version. And then after testing the noise, we're gonna play them a little bit, then we're gonna do the mod, talk about the mod and all the myths regarding the mod, and then we are gonna come back and play again, test the noise again, and all that good stuff. So stay tuned. Now, the first thing that we are doing is we are going to be testing the noise on these pedals. Basically, how I figured out we're going to do this, there is nothing plugged into the pedals. The pedals are going directly into my interface, and I have cranked the gain all the way up, so we raise the actual gain, but raise also the signal to noise ratio, so we don't have a lot of interference from the actual noise from the audio interface. And we're gonna switch the pedal on and off, and we're just gonna see if there is any difference in noise when the pedals are completely cranked. There are a few points that I need to mention here. First of all, if you put the pedal flat, completely flat, there is absolutely no difference in noise. You just have to trust me on that, because I don't want to make this video like an hour long, all right? So second thing is, the GE7 is different from the GE6 in the fact that it also has like a level control, which I didn't crank here, and I will explain later why I was not cranking the level here. So I was only cranking the frequency sliders, basically. So what I want to hear now is what is the difference in noise when we actually crank the pedal. So let's take a look at this. Okay, so first off, G7. So basically what we can see from this is that these two pedals have completely different EQ curves when everything is cranked. Secondly, pretty much the noise level is exactly the same on these two pedals. As I said, if you put them all flat, there is no difference in the noise. So what we're gonna do now, I'm gonna start up this lovely amplification device, and we are going to set these pedals up for like a treble boost, and we're going to try and hear with a lot of gain if there is any noise introduced by these pedals other than like the normal noise that you would normally have. So basically at the moment we are comparing these pedals, so a modded G7, which I modded a long time ago, and a GB7, which is stock. So let me go set up the boogie. Alright, so I've got the boogie set up, and basically this is the core sound, third channel, that kind of Okay, so G7. Okay, obviously these pedals sound different because they are different. They're working on completely different frequency ranges. I sort of set them up a treble boost. Obviously they introduce some noise and some light whistling. I have no gates, nothing, so you can hear everything, but they are not necessarily noisy. First of all, the G7, as I said, was modified before, and the GB7 is completely stock. Now, let's go and proceed with talking about the mods. Okay, so when it comes to modding these pedals, there are some myths, all right? Because there are different packs that people sell, like bundles that you can buy and just do the mod by yourself, which is absolutely great. I want to explore which parts of the pedal you should mod and maybe which parts of the pedal you shouldn't necessarily mod, because yeah, it's not really explained in all those mods. So let's talk about it in general. I have a schematic open over here, and first we need to understand that there are different versions of the G7, all right? They are slightly different in the way how the PCB is laid out, so that would sort of change the way how you would mod this. But in general, what people mod on these pedals is they change the op amps that are actually working in the filter department, which in the original pedal you would have the TL022, which is pretty poor choice for this kind of active filtering. So people would usually mod and change these op amps with something low noise, like NE5532, very good option. I have the NE5532 in the G7. They are not really expensive, but a very, very good choice for this kind of equipment that we are using in the guitar world. Not exactly an audiophile pro audio component, but we don't exactly always want pro audiophile components in guitar equipment, all right? But I don't want to get into that necessarily. Now, the newer, like the GB7, doesn't have the TL022s. They actually use the RC4558, which is quite a different op amp. They are interchangeable, but they are different because, all right, the JRC4558 is like a BJT input based, and the TL022 and 072 are JFET inputs. They're actually quite different op amps, even though they do pretty much the same thing. But the RC558 is not exactly noisy, because if you listen to this pedal stock, it is not necessarily noisy in a way that you just can't use it. I think we should all agree on that, right? Another thing that's very important for the sound of this pedal, especially the G7, because it has this level control, is another JRC4558, which you can see on the schematic over here, which is used to basically do the output staging for this pedal. And when it comes to noise, this op amp is quite important to mod. Now, there is a problem with this, because there are different versions of this pedal. And the version, for example, that this GB7 is, it has this 4558, but it's in a different packaging. It's called SIP8 instead of DIP or DIP8. And in SIP8 packaging, you don't really have better op-amps than, I mean, obviously you have, but not readily available. It's kind of hard to get them. For this mod, basically, I will not be exchanging this op-amp because I really don't think it introduces a lot of noise, and it's not a problematic. It's a perfectly good op-amp for this kind of application. So basically what I'm trying to say is that if you have an old version with the TL022s, I definitely recommend exchanging them because there can be a clear, noticeable difference in noise when you exchange the TL022 with a lower noise op-amp. But if you have the newer versions, I don't think that the newer versions have any problems with noise, all right? That's just my opinion. But we are going to be putting that to the test. And not only that we are going to be putting it to the test, we are also going to exchange these op-amps in the GB7 with some really high quality, high-end audiophile op-amps, which are like super cool and also like super expensive, something like $9 per op-amp, which is quite a bit pricey. But, you know, if you're suffering from a sickness, and just go balls deep, right? Let's just use the absolute best components, and we're gonna try and see and feel if there are any differences. Another thing that it's very important to mention is the capacitor exchange in these pedals, because people like to exchange capacitors in gear. They think that the capacitors make a difference in sound, and capacitors absolutely do make a difference in sound. But the question is, do you always have to do it? Is it worth it? And is the difference going to be big enough? Now, I will talk about this a little bit more since we are moving to the bench and we're going to be seeing what I do, how I do the mods, and I'm gonna explain more of this stuff right about now. And by the way, if you like the information in this video, please support what I'm doing. Support this channel by clicking the subscribe button, clicking the like button, and you can also buy something from the store on the Slightly Technical Academy. Currently, I have a lot of Tonex packs, and there's a lot of cool stuff coming up, and registration is for free. You've got some free Tonex packs over there, but I've got new Tonex packs coming up. You've got the Boogie, like 28 tone models of the Boogie. I don't know if anybody took so many samples of a rectifier. This is a modded rectifier, really great sounding. The Angle is coming up in the next few days, and I'm also doing my Sound City, so like vintage high watt tones, all of them like boosted with different pedals and all that kind of stuff, and also modded Sound City or like modded high watt tones, like high gain stuff. I think that's really interesting, so go check it out. And we are most definitely back with our Boss GE B7 equalizer, which we are going to mod. So the first thing that you do when you mod pedals is you actually have to open it. So let's open it. And try not to lose any screws in the process. Now this is what it looks like inside, at least this one, and it actually has a screw over here which we need to remove so we can actually get the PCB out. Okay, I hope that you can see this. This is basically what the pedal looks like. Now, what I wanted to talk about, and I sort of stopped over there when I was on the other lovely station of mine, is I wanted to say something about changing capacitors. Now, changing capacitors in circuits is definitely a thing. You can achieve great things by changing capacitors, but you need to know that you're actually doing an upgrade. Now, if we actually analyze the capacitors that are here in the circuit that actually do something, if you take a closer look here, I hope that you can see this, and take a look at this area right over here. These capacitors right over here are the capacitors that are used for filtering stuff, all right? These yellow capacitors are something called tantalum capacitors. Now here's the thing, tantalum capacitors are not necessarily at all bad for audio circuits. In fact, they are much better than electrolytic capacitors. If you find a pedal where you have electrolytic capacitors here, I would advise changing them, swapping them for tantalum, or even something better. When I say better, yeah, definitely you can exchange these capacitors for some maybe film capacitors or something that's actually for audio circuits, but because not all film capacitors are really good for audio. Definitely better than electrolytics, but not all of them are really good for audio purposes what I'm trying to say is the tantalum capacitors are usually used because you can create really high capacitance capacitors like 4.7 micro, 10 micro, and stuff like this, which is really hard, impossible to find in like different technologies of capacitors, obviously, like film, block film capacitors, stuff like this, because they do smaller capacitances. Yes, you can find some film capacitors like 4.7, 10 micro, stuff like this, but they're huge. And then I saw, you know, I would see people who would exchange these tantalums for something else, but the capacitors would be huge, and then it would be, I don't like doing that stuff, you know? Just, I like stuff to be neat. I wouldn't put like bigger capacitors here because you will not achieve a huge difference in sound, maybe not even any difference. Now, definitely some of the smaller capacitors, if you like, you can exchange these film capacitors over here if you find better ones. But these ones are not that bad. If you would like to have some ultra premium capacitor type of shit, go do it. Now, there are a few capacitors that I will exchange, which may make a difference, and these are the small electrolytics right over here. This one, and this one right over here. They are all 1 microfarad electrolytics, and I'm gonna swap them for, I think I have some multi-layer capacitors or something, which are my 1 microfarad, and they are supposed to be better for audio because they are simply non-polarized, have a lower ESR. They should be better for audio. So I will not speak about capacitors anymore. I will now remove these 3 ICs. Oh, I hope you can see that. These 3 ICs, I'm going to remove them and swap them with sockets, so we can then socket the new ICs, and I'm gonna also exchange the capacitors, and then we're gonna test everything, and then also we're gonna listen to the stuff that I recorded before. Amazing stuff. All right, and we are back. So I did a small mod, and you can see right over here that I have socketed new ICs, and I have also exchanged a few capacitors. I hope that you can see that. Now, I have used the OPA 2134. This is the same op-amp that is featured on a lot of these websites, and it is a really, really good high-end op-amp, which is readily available with a lot of these electronics vendors, but there are some other solutions, obviously. There are some products from Linear Technologies, from Analog Devices, some stuff that you can use other than this one, but I would always go for a more like musical audio op-amp instead of like precision op-amps, because there are some precision op-amps for like active filters. I always prefer like the musical devices when it comes to these pedals. Now, since I did the mod, let's go and hear how it sounds. All right, this is very subjective now because I'm actually making this video and I'm testing this out by myself for the first time, because whenever I would do these mods, I wouldn't even test the pedals, I don't care. I would just like do the mod and would sound great and all this kind of stuff. But it's the first time I'm testing these really high-end op amps, and I don't know we're gonna see the noise threshold and all these kind of stuff. But I really like how this pedal feels now. It feels different, and there is a certain softness in the high end. I don't know about the noise floor because I kind of set it up, you know, like as close as I possibly could. I kind of also made it a little bit, you know, higher volume, so it is a little bit noisy, maybe a little bit more than I would normally use when I'm recording, and you know what I mean. But there is a softness to it that I dig. I really dig that. So basically, you heard now that we have a few sound samples, and now I will proceed to testing the noise, and we're gonna take a look at the equalizer again, and we are all together going to figure out, is there any difference, and is the difference worth it? All right, and we're back. So I have everything set up exactly like I did before. So level is at 0 and all the frequencies are completely cranked, and we're gonna take a look at the noise floor and we're gonna discuss it to how it was before. And through some magic of video editing, I will also make some comparisons for you so you can also see and hear the difference. And we are back. We're gonna take a look at the noise floor now. Everything is set up exactly like it was before. Level at noon, all frequencies cranked. And let's take a look at the noise floor. I just made a screenshot for myself so I can also make the comparison while recording the video. To me, it looks like there is a clear difference in the high end. There is a lot less high end, whether that is noise or whether there is less gain in the high end. I can't say right now, but there is a clear difference. And obviously, through the magic of video editing, I'm gonna make some comparisons now. My subjective opinion at this point in time is that I really dig how this sounds. There is this softness in the high end which makes it completely different how it feels when you play the guitar, and I do really dig this. But also realistically, do you need this mod? No, you don't really need this mod. Does it make a huge difference in the noise floor or something? I don't really think so, especially compared to like the new Boss pedals. Now, what have we learned in this video? Well, I have basically learned that the new Boss pedals don't really have issues with noise. We have also learned that the old Boss pedals, just trust me, they do have a slight noise problem, and you have a huge improvement if you put new like op amps in it. The second layer of the mod, or second level of the mod, would be just exchanging a few of those capacitors, and there are some other things like adding an additional capacitor in the feedback loop of this whatever level stage. I don't think that's quite necessary. I don't do these in my pedals. I don't think that's a good idea, but it's absolutely fine if you like to do that. So basically, we have learned that these mods are actually quite cool, and if you're one of these people who have a diagnosis like me, that you like to mod your pedals for like absolute maximum power, do it. It's fabulous. If you were, you know, not really sure whether you should do this mod, don't do it. It will not make you a better guitar player. And with that said, I will end this video. I love you all, guys. See you.